Hey parents, before we start today's episode, I have exciting news. We're hosting a podcast pop-up where you can interact with the resources and guests featured here in real life. It's the second annual Podcast-a-Palooza, and it's free to attend. There will be a live animal presentation by Animal Tales and food trucks like Bam Snowballs, Kip's Hot Dogs, and Melt Pensacola. Plus, one lucky guest will win a $250 Amazon gift card. So mark your calendar for Saturday, February 1st, 2025, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Booker T. Washington High School. We'll see you there.
Our students all day long, they have significant cognitive impairments, and we're telling them, okay, it's time for lunch, it's time to do this. But when they go to Snoezelen, it's their choice. And it's one of the few times of the day where they get to go pick where they want to be. And so I think that's powerful as well.
That's incredibly powerful. That feels like the whole point to me. Welcome to the Voices United in Education podcast. Each week, we showcase the teachers, administrators, and community members who go the extra mile to contribute to the success of every student in Escambia County. You'll meet the real people behind the titles and learn about the amazing resources to support every student's success. If you have a child with autism spectrum disorder, you know how challenging it can be to engage them in learning and behaviors required for the neurotypical world. This is not only frustrating for you and your child, it can lead your child to STEM in ways that may hurt themselves. My next guests are the Principal and Occupational Therapist at Westgate, an Escambia County Public School for students with intellectual disabilities and autism spectrum disorder. Today, these two ladies will be sharing how a specially designed space called the Snoezelen Center is helping students and families make serious headway in both behaviors and learning. At 13,000 square feet, it's the largest brick-and-mortar center in the U.S., and it's right here in Pensacola. They're going to give us a peek into the difference it's making and how you can create your own sensory space at home. Championing, is that right? Championing. Thank you. Championing children and pioneering progress, Cathy Rudd and Lindsay Sullivan. Thanks for being here, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
And welcome back, Cathy.
Thank you.
So, Lindsay, let's start with the name Snoezelen because it's interesting. It's different. What's the significance of the name?
It is. So I love to tell this, especially when we're giving tours, because it is interesting. It's a Dutch word, two words, Snoezelen and Snoezelen, which are even more interesting. But together they make Snoezelen, and they mean to seek and explore and to relax. And that's
in what language?
Dutch.
In Dutch. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's that's the goal of a Snoezelen Center, for the participants to seek and explore or to become more relaxed. So Snoezelen and Snoezelen.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm impressed that you were able to just say those right off the bat.
Well, it's been a few years, so
you've had practice.
Yes.
Why that specific name? Is it a brand? Why is it decided that it was named that? How did we get there?
So my understanding is that in the Netherlands, there were two Dutch therapists, and it was like a summer fair with tents and things. And so these two therapists said, we want to have this sensory type tent. And they had different components. I think I read like some lights and some fans that blew paper. And so they had such a positive outcome with the people that stopped by their tent and used it, that they carried on, and they decided to coin the term Snoezelen. And so that's a brand of a sensory space now. I think that was 1970 also that it started.
Wow. And Cathy, can you kind of paint a picture of what this space looks like? It's a standalone building. Walk us through. We open the doors. What do we see?
Well, and ours has a special name too. It's the Lacey Collier Sensory Center, because he was paramount in us getting the funds to build the center. But you walk in and there's a beautiful atrium, and the atrium area sort of matches what the rooms opposite them would look like. And then you enter down a hallway, and the hallway is also decorated for the room. For example, our first room is jungle. And so that area is all plants and animals, and The jungle room has a wooden bridge and trees and jungle creatures, and then we have a space room, and that room has the slide in it and a giant spaceship and other features. Then we have a magic room, and that is probably more of a technical room, wouldn't you say, in a way? And then our last room is polar, and that is where we have the polar bears, the igloo, and it's all in like blues and whites and grays, like you were in Antarctica or somewhere.
Wow, that sounds really special.
It's very special.
It also sounds like the most amazing playground ever. But this is therapeutic. Can you kind of explain how this isn't just a play space that's very fancy?
Yes. So it does look like a playground. I like to describe it almost Disney-like. So it's magical from, the floor to the ceiling. But yes, and it's not a playground, although it looks like one. So we educate our staff. All of our teachers, all of our support staff are trained on what is a multisensory complex. So it's affecting our students' bodies. It's altering them on a neurological level. And we want them to understand what they're looking at when they're observing their students, so that they're not using it as a playground, and they are using it more therapeutically, and they understand that they can carry that information that they receive about their students into their classroom, and their students are more successful across their whole school environment.
So they are trained to use it as a tool, essentially.
Correct. Yes. And so it's just part of their toolbox that they can use to support their students moving up to learning.
Can either of you give me an example of what kind of therapeutic effect it would have on a student? Because you're an occupational therapist, Lindsay. Cathy, you're the principal at Westgate. In your world, this makes perfect sense. But for an outside person listening to this and visualizing what you're describing, they may have a hard time understanding why this isn't just nice. Like, tell me why this is important.
Well, we have, like, one student in particular was doing a lot of self-injurious behavior. He was scratching his face, pulling hair, hitting himself, biting. He was always marked up, from where he was breaking the skin with his nails. And as he started going to Snoezelen, he became less and less elevated, we like to call it, escalated. He was able to calm himself without doing those kind of behaviors. And his parents, in fact, were so impressed that they have a whole room in their house now devoted to sensory. And they were able to know what to select because of what he had chosen and what he preferred to do at Westgate in the sensory center. It's not a one-size-fits-all. What some child needs, another child might steer away from. So that was part of what Lindsay was talking about, the training that the teachers have to go through.
So the teachers are not only able to use the spaces as tools, but use it as, I would say, like observational recommendations to the parents. Is that right?
They could.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was going to say that they do, after they're trained, and if they're bringing their class over, they do have a form that they fill out. So they're thinking about their students, and it's not one size fits all. And so they may know that one of their students doesn't like the loud noises. So they have a paper that they can indicate that they do not want the music on, for example. Or if they have a student who maybe becomes a little bit disorganized and dysregulated with a lot of lights, they may select on this paper that they don't want the bubble tubes on. And so they're filling that information out based on what they know about their students, and they turn that in before they come to the complex. And so I will turn on a room according. So if maybe we have a student who doesn't like the overhead lights to be off, and the teacher will say, leave the lights on. And so I'll have the room kind of ready. And so the teachers really have to investigate. They have to know, there's sensory preferences for their students. So
that sounds so special. I mean, that's kind of exciting that support is not only there for the students, but it's there for the teachers. That must make their job easier.
I think so. I think most of them.
I think so, too.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that's cool about when they go to Snoezelen is our students don't get a whole lot of opportunities to make choices. Adults are making choices for our students all day long. They have significant cognitive impairments, and we're telling them, okay, it's time for lunch, it's time to do this. But when they go to Snoezelen, it's their choice. And it's one of the few times of the day where they get to go pick where they want to be. And so I think that's powerful as well.
That's incredibly powerful. That feels like the whole point to me. I mean, when you feel like you have autonomy over your life, you are, even if you're neurotypical, you feel calmer. You feel prepared for whatever's next. You feel like more flexible for the unknown.
Right.
What's the research behind sensory spaces for kids who have intellectual disabilities or ASD?
So there's a lot of research. There still needs to be a lot more, but I think the research that's out there has set the stage for further, research into sensory spaces and Snoezelen specifically. In 2011, I know that University of West Florida, so here in Pensacola, they did conduct some research specifically on our Snoezelen Center. So that's very cool. I think there were 50 participants. They looked mostly at behaviors, and their conclusion was that there was a decrease of overall adverse behaviors, similar to the story that Ms. Rudd shared. And so that's encouraging for sure. Sensory spaces in general, there's positive indications. I want to say it doesn't work for everyone, so like it is not a one-size-fits-all. So there needs to be more research specifically for different diagnoses. There's the intellectual disabilities, autism. There's even research on people with dementia. So some elderly people, I like to just say it's from birth to death. They have really researched each category. And some of it indicates that maybe it doesn't work great for certain populations. I was reading one study, I think I shared with Ms. Rudd. I thought it was pretty fascinating. So they took a population of people that had traumatic brain injuries, so CP, TBIs, and they studied an EEG on each individual. So that's where you have the leads, the sticky pads, kind of on your head, and it's studying your brain waves. And so they studied the information from these EEGs before and after the participants' visit to a Snoezelen or a multisensory complex, and they found an overall calming or relaxation effect on the participants. I don't know the technical terms for some of the wavelengths and that kind of thing, but they saw a decrease in some frequency of wavelengths that indicate stress or, not a calm person. So I thought that was pretty fascinating.
I feel like I could use that.
Right, exactly. Everyone.
I mean, there's definitely, in your work, this is a question for both of you, since we were talking about, for everyone, and we could all use this. Do you feel like the things that you learn from the Snoezelen Center and the students' interaction from the Snoezelen Center, is there crossover for what we all could learn about ourselves from them?
Oh, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think so, because it's funny, since I've started at Westgate and paid more attention to sensory, I've been able to diagnose my sister, which is very helpful.
I mean, every sister wants to diagnose her sister.
Yes.
So,
but no, you're just more aware. It makes you more aware of sensory, and you don't really realize how important sensory is. I always thought sensory was just the 5 senses that you learn in school, taste, touch, smell. And it's way more than that. And it's way more complicated how it affects our body. So, yes.
Can you give an example?
Ooh. you give one, Lindsay.
Okay. So beyond the 5 senses, I like to say that we learn about in kindergarten, the most important ones for our students at Westgate, and possibly, any students that have a challenging sensory need, the vestibular sense and the proprioceptive sense, right? And this is why we train our staff, because it is very complicated. But that's more movement, and our Snoezelen complex offers a variety of movement.
Which one is movement? The vestibular?
It can be both. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Vestibular is kind of your balance in your inner ear.
Okay.
Proprioceptive is like in your muscles, in your joints. So again, movement, but more like how you're moving and your speed and your force.
So is that why stemming would be, like, we all stem to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. We all have something that we do when we feel nervous, and consciously or subconsciously we're trying to comfort ourselves. Is that connected to those senses that you just said?
It could be, yes. You're by, tapping your leg or tapping on the table in a meeting. You're just trying to stay focused and stay organized and regulated. And so it all works together. We're taking input from everywhere. And sometimes, you don't have to have a diagnosis, but sometimes people have trouble taking that input from the environment and remaining organized and remaining calm or able to learn. So, yeah, it's very complex. I wanted to add, too, that when we do our training, we, of course, take all of our teachers over to the Snoezelen complex. And there's so many sensory checklists out there, but we give them a checklist for themselves and ask them to participate in the equipment. So if they're going down the slide or they're jumping or they get in the ball pit, they can select how each activity made them feel. So that's what we're asking them to do, when they're with their students. So it's complex, but
is this open to the public that they could do the exercise that you just described?
Unfortunately, it's not.
Okay.
Westgate is a public school, and our students pretty much use the Snoezelen Center all day. We have it available for when a student becomes unregulated and needs to go into the room with an assistant, and also classes are always using the Snoezelen Center. But that's the beauty of sensory. Every family can have a sensory area in their home. And all our varying exceptionality classes, they all have access to sensory items as well. So while Snoezelen is a fabulous, fabulous place, that's not the only way to deliver take care of sensory needs. It can just be a small closet or a classroom or a corner of a classroom.
Well, that's the perfect segue, because I know, Lindsay, you had a few inspirational ideas for how parents can create a sensory space in their home. So can you share those?
Yes. So most recently, we did a little space in a classroom. So I'm thinking of that, and it could be in a home, in a closet, or a room. But going back to that proprioception and vestibular, I would include some type of movement in that space, whether it's like a rocking chair. You could have just a regular rocking chair. They make special gaming type chairs that rock. Our kids like those. You could have a little trampoline. You could even just have one of those like yoga exercise balls. That would be movement. And I'll tell you, the kid will likely know what they need to do.
Really?
And how they need to use it.
Okay.
So I would have some movement. I would have I really like some auditory input. So if you have some sounds or sound machine or some music, and then what else? Visually, you could really fabric or a sequin wall or.
I love the sequin wall idea.
Yeah,
I'm partial to that.
The sequin wall,
like those
cool.
pillows, that you can pet and they change color.
Exactly.
A whole wall. I would never
fabric.
leave that room.
So you just get the fabric off
Really?
of Amazon. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Get the fabric on Amazon and just hang it up. And then it also pairs with something tactile so that they can touch. Like if it's a sequin pillow, it's visual and tactile. So yeah, there's a lot of options to set up a space catered to your specific, child. a lot of resources online. So
you could get carpet samples or different flooring samples and put them together on a board, or depending on how much you can sweet talk from a carpet place, and have different squares, different parts of the floor, because if they have different textures, that's something that your student would like. And about the auditory, I just wanted to add that the student has to be able, or your child has to be able to turn that auditory on or off, or up or down, or you're just forcing a noise that they may or may not want to hear at that time.
Oh, that's so smart. I was just looking at the sound panels behind you and thinking, oh, that would be a neat sensory element, because they're foam and they're like jagged. They have like little triangles in them, so you can touch them and it's kind of satisfying. There's lots of possibilities here, which is really exciting. Before we wrap, are there any more success stories that either of you would like to share?
I have a lot of success stories just because I'm there in Snoezelen and I'm in the classrooms. And the benefit to educating our staff on sensory, and that it's not just a playground, they really are investigating and they're seeing what works for their student. And so I'll have a teacher that'll say, when we go to the space room, my student really enjoys this. And how can we get something like that in our classroom? So recently we had a student, we just got him, it was so simple. It was just a big therapy ball. It was just a big yoga ball. And so brought it to his class, and she sends me, feedback, and that he can sit on the ball and participate in some of the academics. Whereas before he struggled a little bit with like a classroom chair. So just tons of stories like that, where they're finding out what works, what their students' sensory preferences, and taking that to the classroom and working their way up to, more successful academic learning.
And if I could share one, this one's cool because it's actually what created the push to develop the Sensory Center. Was when there was a student, she was intellectually disabled. People always think autism, but it works for everything. But she would not move. She had very limited movement. And at this time, they just had a small closet corner of the room. And she started reaching and moving towards the fiber optic lights. And the progress that she made was incredible. This child never moved. And the sensory, the lights and that room, the environment, she learned to move and crawl. And that would not have happened without, as far as we know, it was not happening until she saw the fiber optics and just wanted to reach for them. And she was drawn to that. So that was pretty cool. When they saw the result of that, they said, no, we have to do more. We have to have a bigger building. We have to. And that's how the whole thing started.
That's a highly motivating environment.
And highly outside the box. That's what I love is what you're describing. I'm really having this picture in my mind of teachers and staff that aren't thinking so much in, formula. They're thinking like in a creative way, a problem-solving way. It makes me think of Odyssey of the Mind, actually. How they're like, this is the problem.
Right.
And so, your staff and the teachers are trying different things in order to have the best outcome for the students. Yeah. And I love that, Lindsay, you shared some ways that parents can have that sort of adapt that mindset in their own home with sensory spaces.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies, so much for coming today. I appreciate you. Where can people learn more about the Snoezelen Center online?
We do have it as part of our Westgate webpage. And also the Snoezelen Foundation will be going to organizations soon because we're starting a new fundraising campaign. Sensory is expensive. And so we'll be doing presentations and stuff in the community as well.
Okay, so keep an eye out for the presentations. And in the meantime, we can visit the website, which I'll have linked.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and share. Voices United in Education is a production of Escambia County Public Schools.